As if the impact of COVID-19 has not hurt businesses enough, the new Brexit-related immigration laws may certainly impact talent recruitment. I know business leaders have to juggle a lot, but my concern is that I perceive that too many of them have been approaching the immigration question on a piecemeal basis. Perhaps an employee here, an employee there, or say one department at a time. Now, to me, this seems inefficient. And I wondered if leaders need to think about a company-wide plan. And if they do, what would one look like? So who better to ask than our favorite immigration lawyer from Latitude Law, Shara Pledger. Lovely to see you again, Shara.
And you, thank you very much for inviting me back.
Without a doubt, I know that you're the best. Before we get started, where are we currently with the new immigration rules? Please give us a brief overview.
Well, at time of recording, yesterday the Home Secretary unveiled a new 132-page document to give a bit more detail into what we are looking at from 2021. It mainly reinforced points that we already knew, which has value in itself because this government has had a slight tendency occasionally to make announcements and not follow through on them. So actually it is quite useful to see where announcements have been repeated and where things will be coming to fruition. Slightly more disappointing not to have a bit more detail in relation to exactly how some of these schemes are going to work. But what it does mean is that we know for sure that there is this real focus on employers having sponsorship in order to have foreign talent moving forward. And that really helps us to give employers a focus for themselves in terms of what they need to do to plan going ahead post-Brexit.
Excellent, right. Thank you for that brief of the 132 pages. I don't envy you reading through all of that. Now, should a business, as I said in my opening piece, have a company-wide plan to manage these new rules? And if so, how should it go about it? What questions need to be asked?
I think absolutely all companies should consider how these changes are going to affect them as a whole. Obviously, depending on what sector somebody is operating in, it will probably have a bigger difference as to how much these changes are going to have an impact. But the biggest sort of change that some companies might see is that where historically, perhaps only one area of the company really needed to engage with the immigration rules. It might be that there was a particular team, for example, that was only ever required to recruit from outside of the European Union. That probably will not be the case moving forward. It'll be much more likely that across the business, there will now be, even if it's just odd individuals, but multiple people who now have to engage with these rules. And what's really important for a company to do is to make sure that the HR team centrally, or somebody who has responsibility centrally, is comfortable with what those requirements are and knows what they're doing moving forward. Because it will very much be the case now that there will be lots of individuals who are all facing the same rules, but they may well be based in different areas of the business, perhaps even different offices and locations of the business. And having that kind of centralized knowledge is really important to make sure that things continue to move smoothly.
Yeah, I take your point there. And HR are already under pressure, aren't they, through skeleton staff and all the other things they've got to consider with inequality and so on. So some professional help from people like yourself would be sensible. I guess a company also needs to know the future intention of its current foreign workers, go or stay. Can they do this legally, or will it worry those employees?
You can certainly ask a question legally. What companies need to be very careful about is putting any kind of pressure on their existing workforce to take particular action. Now that the UK has started that process of formally leaving the European Union, we obviously have the deadline that's coming at the end of this year in relation to the end of free movement. I think a lot of people have really sort of married all of these dates together to being, well, by the end of the year, there'll be a new system in place, and therefore I need to have got all of my current workforce documented by that time. It's not the case. There is an additional 6 months of time that allows EU nationals to get their documents to make their applications. And so putting undue pressure on people now can be quite risky because, well, firstly, obviously it would make them feel very uncomfortable. If they'd not made an application for a particular reason, suddenly having an employer putting pressure on them to do it can be really unhelpful. But secondly, from an employer perspective, making it a requirement to continue in employment, to have documents for which there is no legal requirement, is at best risky, at worst unlawful. And you know, I'd really always encourage an employer, if they're intending on making any sweeping changes to their processes around this area, to at least talk to an immigration lawyer, but also probably an employment lawyer, because while there's a lot of overlap in terms of those two areas, you know, you can really stray from one into the other, and it's important that employers know exactly what they're doing and why.
Yes, a little bit of a minefield unless you take in some professional expertise. So succession planning, growth, new products and services all demand new and fresh talent in some way, in particular things like digital transformation. And that often requires overseas talent. Do you think leaders in HR, because of these new rules, will have to address their people plans in a new way? And what would that be? Perhaps earlier planning to remain legal?
I think definitely succession planning is always important for any business, obviously. And, you know, businesses, I think, generally will have an idea what their staff turnover might be. But, you know, as the saying very much goes at the moment, we live in unprecedented times right now. And that idea about staff turnover is possibly very different to what it would be if people were having this conversation 6 months ago. So having an idea about where those staff might need to come from and how that might feel different compared to how it's been pre-Brexit is really important for businesses. And one of the things that has been really reinforced in the latest policy document, and to be fair to the government, they've been sending this message out now for several months, is if you do not have a sponsor license already and you believe you will need one post-Brexit, get the jump on this process and, you know, get your application submitted now, because absolutely what employers do not need is to just start to get back on track after coronavirus and then suddenly realize, oh, actually, we're coming up to 2021, we need a sponsor license. We've not even started the process yet, and it's going to take several months. Now, I'm pleased to say that one of the things that was clarified in yesterday's document is this idea to streamline and really strip down that application process, make it quicker and easier for employers. But that hasn't materialized yet, and we don't know when it's coming. So even if they can get it down to sort of 4 weeks, if that's only available from November, it's really not that helpful in terms of sort of getting things planned. So really, if people know that this is something with which they should engage, they should do it sooner rather than later, even if it's just making the plan, if you're not, you know, ready to take actual action.
When I met you the first time on our Meet the Leader show, what struck me was the fact that, like we do in health, you're a consultant rather than a GP, you know. And so how at Latitude Law, and I put the URL, by the way, behind me, how at Latitude Law do you go about advising leaders on ensuring they are legally compliant in this? It's a minefield, isn't it, regards to immigration? What's your consultative approach to a business?
I think really our role in terms of acting for employers in this area is to just to help them to really kind of cut through all of the kind of masses of documents that surround this area. I mean, yesterday's policy document, 132 pages, to be honest, is quite a short one. The sponsor guidance is well over 200 pages, plus appendices, plus user guides for online systems. So there's a lot for people to take in, and it's not really feasible that somebody engaging with this process for the first time will be able to just read through all of that, take it all in, and then feel comfortable with the process. And that's what we are really here to do, is to make sure that people have got those key points, have hit those key markers to make sure that the applications are all successful, but also that they understand what their duties are moving forward. There's this sort of overarching principle with sponsorship that the people that benefit from it are responsible for it. And I think new sponsors get so engaged with the process of applying and just getting through the process and getting it all in place that occasionally they forget that actually there's now ongoing duties that apply to them every minute of every day that they are now trading, that they need to be aware of, because one slip and your license can be taken away from you. So really, that's what we at Latitude, that's what we aim to do, is basically equip people with what they need to understand those points and be able to make this work for their business. And for some, if they've got a really big HR team that's really engaged with this process, that might mean that they just need to come to us with specific issues that arise. For other smaller businesses, it might mean that they just do not have the resources to be able to take all of this on, and they need to have somebody in their corner who is familiar with it already and is able to just lead the way for them so they know in which direction they're heading.
Wow, that last little point you just made there about the ongoing responsibility, the duty of care, is something I truly have missed, and I've read a lot about it. So thank you for that one, and thank our viewers and listeners, or thank you for that one too. Can we finish our chat with 3 key immigration law reminders that business leaders need to be thinking about now?
I would say, first of all, if you've not started planning, you need to start making a plan. I think through no fault of their own, really, a lot of business leaders have not really engaged very much because there hasn't really been anything to engage with, to be frank, until probably around February of this year. But obviously the Brexit process has taken such a long period of time. I mean, 2016 feels like a very long time ago now. And I think people really did get fatigue from it. And without any detail, it was sort of, well, we're just going to have to cross this bridge when we come to it. That absolutely won't work, now. So people need to make sure that they're engaging with the material that is now available. I would say probably second point is what I said earlier. If you know you need a license and you haven't applied yet, you really ought to be at least knowing what's required of you to do that, if not going ahead to make the application as soon as possible to get it in place. And then probably the third point is really to try and engage with the existing workforce. People do need to tread quite carefully, but obviously that there are changes that are coming, and employers need to have an idea whether people are going to come or stay, or whether they're going to apply. If there's a problem, do they need some assistance to be able to apply? There's always that requirement to tread carefully, whether that's making people feel uncomfortable. Crucially, it's also about whether employers accidentally stray into giving advice. Immigration area is a regulated area of law, and it can actually be an offence to give people legal advice if you're not actually qualified to do so. But people do sometimes just need reassurance and support, and that's probably the best way to maintain that staff retention rate at the moment, is to make people feel that they're valued and that their concerns are understood, and that there is help available if they need it.
Excellent. Shara Pledger, Latitude Law, as always, brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.